Hi everybody. I want to touch on a subject today that is something that I feel all of us scapegoats have to deal with in one way or another, and that is the subject of absolute aloneness and loneliness, and that desperation, that emptiness that comes with the knowing that there's no one out there, and there's no one out there reaching out to us. There's no one out there thinking of us. We have been abandoned emotionally. We're emotional orphans, really. We've been abandoned by the people who are supposed to be our clan, the people that are supposed to take care of us when we were kids. And I want to share with you that part of my experience because it has been such a huge part of my life. That feeling of being completely alone. And that really begins very early, because I remember crying myself to sleep as a young girl on a regular basis. And I've never had that thing where the parent hears their child crying and then they will actually come to your room and say, "Hey, are you okay?" and talk about our problems. It's like those sitcoms. Like I grew up in the 90s, and I remember there was that TGIF night, and there was a show called Full House, and I remember watching that show, and it was a family show, and at the end of the show, you always had the dad who went to his daughter's room, and they always talked about their problems, and then they hugged, and there was family discussions, and I was watching that. I was like, wow, like I wonder if that actually exists, if people actually do these things with their kids, because I didn't know what that was. That was like fiction for me. And oftentimes my mother would often unleash hell on me in the evening before sleep. When I got home after school, obviously that's where I would get, or after being out there, come home, and that's often where she would just pick such crazy fights for no reason, and then she would slam the door after she was done and would leave me alone in my room, and I would just cry myself to sleep, and I would cry and cry and cry and cry, and I would cry myself to sleep. And there's no way, I just remember her being so damn arrogant, and the fact that when things happened, it was always me who had to go see her to comfort her. I was always the one who had to go comfort her. I was always the one who had to go beg and crawl on my knees for forgiveness if something, I was always the one who had to make the move to go towards her, but she would never come towards me. She would never, come after, of course, my God, that's it. It's almost laughable to, it's like in the realm of the impossible. It would just not happen. Her coming to see me while I was crying in my room, crying myself to sleep, to talk things out, to tuck me in, no, it's, that just never happened. And, I remember having such a huge imagination, very active, and I think a lot of us survivors do, because it's a defense mechanism. It's a way to sort of, escape this reality and retreat into our mind. And in my mind, I would often imagine this big green dragon that would put her wing on me and would protect me and would cuddle with me. And I would be like sleeping against the belly of this big, huge green dragon. And that helped me fall asleep, that it was such a powerful image in my mind that I could calm myself down with my imagination, and that's what would put me to sleep. I would put myself to sleep that way, but there was never any sort of "Are you okay?" from any member of my family, ever. It was always blame and shame. So growing up, this aloneness, this powerful, lonely feeling, And when I reached high school and young adulthood, I just remember that feeling of aloneness always just followed me. There was periods of my life where I had a lot of friends, and I remember the first group of friends that accepted me was the dysfunctional kids in high school. It was, the kids that started drinking early, that started smoking early, that that had troubles with their parents, that they came from dysfunctional homes, and that was the people that I sort of mingled with. That's where I was at home, where it felt like home for a little while. But people kind of become like a drug almost, in a sense, because I would use people to fill that void, but that void was always there. So if it wasn't that group, then it would be like unhealthy relationships that I would just throw myself in. I just consistently was looking to be around people all the time, and I would try and find comfort in men and in groups of people. And I just remember being young and having this powerful feeling of just wanting to be rescued, just somebody please rescue me, not knowing at all how to do it on my own. I was young. I didn't know anything about anything. I just knew that void was always there. And this is an experience that I want to share with you, because I think that a lot of you guys can relate to this. Just that feeling of you're alone in your apartment, in that shitty apartment with shitty neighbors in a shitty neighborhood, and there's no one to call, and there's no one to reach out to. It's just that feeling of emptiness, and that's a feeling that really followed me for a really long time. And I want to talk about transforming that feeling with you, because for me, that after a lot of work, I have to tell you that now I actually really enjoy my own company a lot more than I enjoy being around people in general. It is important to connect, okay? Don't get me wrong, I've talked about this before. Forging connections is a very important part of healing. But today I want to talk about it in a slightly different way, because connections are super important. However, connecting with yourself and being comfortable with yourself is the most important thing, I feel. Being comfortable with yourself no matter who comes and goes in your life, and not sort of relying on that. Not emotionally relying on that, but knowing that you can emotionally rely on yourself. And that, to me, I think was the ultimate work that I had to do for myself. Now, when it comes to relationships, what I had to learn and understand is that it's true, you have people that come for a reason, for a season, and for a lifetime. People come and go. And there are two things. The first thing is that relationships really are an exchange of energy. And I had to start viewing things in that way. Because before I used to, I would throw myself into these relationships and I would pour everything in. I would rescue. I would try to solve problems. I would try, I would give resources that I didn't have, because I felt like that's what I had to do to be loved. I gave everything I had. I would sacrifice myself almost for other people. And I would often end up being so disappointed, because I realized that people don't always reciprocate. And I always felt so hurt and so betrayed when that would happen, and that would happen often. And I didn't realize at the time that I actually was really unhealthy, because healthy people keep some for themselves. Healthy people have to have a certain level of selfishness. You know, how many times have you, as a scapegoat, okay, ask you this, how many times as a scapegoat have you actually stood up to someone only to be backstabbed later on, especially with family? I mean, this happened to me. I can tell you, sitting at the dinner table, and you know, because the thing is, I'm Canadian, but my origins are European. I'm Polish, and so my mother had the thing that she would do is, when she would talk behind people's back, she would do it in Polish in front of them, so they couldn't understand what was going on. And she would do this, you know, if my brother brought his wife and his kids over and we were all there, and she would make comments about, negative comments, you know, about things that she's projecting. Oh, they're not smiling, and oh, she gained weight, and look at this horrible behavior, this and that, you know. And she would say these terrible things in Polish. And I remember I would be like, I would defend those people in Polish, you know. I would be like, what are you talking about? Like, you know, we're having dinner, like, that's not true, and stop doing this, it's not cool. Like, I would stand up, you know, for these kinds of things. I would defend people, you know. And then of course a fight would ensue, and I would then be told that I was the problem, that I should keep my mouth shut, and that I shouldn't have caused a thing. And I would be told off by the very people that I was defending, you know. This cycle actually happened quite a lot in my life, you know, that I would actually pour it all and defend and stand up to people, or defend only, or put a lot of my energy into something, and then all of a sudden the person that you would think would stand up for you in return, well, they won't, you know. And that created also such deep wounds of, you know, not being worthy, and maybe never being enough, no matter how hard I tried, you know. So the thing about this is that, look, relationships are actually an exchange of energy, okay? You give and you receive on both ends. And if this energy exchange stops in some way, well, usually people will drift apart. That's just the human nature. That's just the nature of things. Like, think about when you were young and you went to school and you had a friend at school, but then when you went to high school or college, you drifted apart, you know? It's because that energy exchange wasn't there anymore. There wasn't common ground holding you together anymore. It was just, you know, it just drifted naturally, because you have different interests, and you know, what you guys needed from each other back in the day when you were at school was no longer the same situation, and you drifted apart, you know. So relationships really are like this energy exchange. And if you look at it that way, and you step back a little bit, it will help you with how you deal with relationships. Because remember that this energy exchange is not one way. It has to be two-way for it to work, really, you know. And if you put too much of your energy into something, chances are a lot of the times you're not gonna get that back, because a healthy person does take care of themselves. A healthy person is not gonna necessarily deplete all their resources for somebody else. They're gonna make sure that they have enough money. They're gonna make sure that they're comfortable enough. They're gonna make sure that, you know, that they're okay before giving. And this is what I invite you to do as well when it comes to people in your life. Be really careful with jumping on that rescuing boat, with pouring all your energy in, and you know, revealing your inner world so quickly to people. And I'm gonna explain to you the second thing, which is sort of how I do it and how I learned to do it. And I've talked about this before, but I'm gonna mention it here again because it's so relevant. So imagine like 3 circles, okay? You've got the circle of discard. This is the people that no contact, you're never going to speak to them again. You have the middle circle, which is the observation circle, and then you have the people that you let in. I think most people that I meet, that I know, will go into the middle observation circle. The observation circle can last years, because you can't really get to know a person until you get to know a person. You know what I mean? So when you meet people, you put them in the observation circle and you observe them. You don't necessarily pour everything in. They don't have to know everything about your inner world either. Like if they do something that triggers you, you don't always have to tell them. Number one, because first of all, you're recovering from trauma, and so you might have some triggers that are your own that you have to deal with. And number two, because also, yeah, they could be people that are not healthy for you, and you have to gauge, but they could also be good for you for some things. We don't know. Like it's a confusion. Like we don't know where they stand yet. And so observing people is really the best thing to do without emotionally fully investing yourself into that, without pouring your heart out, without without depleting yourself emotionally. Because once you put someone in the, okay, this is a person that I trust, this is a person that I'm gonna keep, this is a person, like for example, my children, obviously, the people close to me, my husband, my children, these are people that I would do anything. It doesn't matter. No sacrifice is too great to keep the people that I love in my life, and that is my true nature. I've always been like that. I've always been very passionate, and I think all of us scapegoats really are, and so it's very easy for us to do this. So that category is really reserved for for people that have really earned their place, or for people that, like for your children, for example, it's really a special category. But most people are going to be in that observation zone. Most people, I think, are going to be in that zone that you observe. If they do something, you're not necessarily going to tell them. Watch first, allow for emotions to pass, for triggers to pass, and see if it's worth it at all even to bring something up. Because look, your inner world is sacred, okay? Your consciousness and your unconscious, your heart, your body, your history, all of that is yours and belongs just to you. It doesn't belong to anybody else. It's just you. Only you have walked your path. Only you know your feelings. Only you know your history. Nobody else knows what you've been through. Your inner space is sacred. And giving people access to your inner space is a sacred thing. Okay? You don't just throw a sacred thing wherever. Like, you safeguard it and you keep it for something special. Okay? So what I'm saying is, you don't necessarily have to cut people out. You don't have to, it's not black and white, like I hate you or I love you. Remember, there's this huge middle zone, the observation zone, and that zone really could last a couple of years sometimes, like I said, because it's important for you to safeguard yourself. It's important to connect. So, let's say you have an activity that you do, and I don't know, whatever, let's say you go skateboard, that's your activity, and every time you go skate at the park, it's always the same group, and you get to know them, and you're friends with them, and you interact with them. But that doesn't mean that you're going to necessarily bring them in deeper, and tell them what's in your heart when you see them. It's you're gonna safeguard that for when you meet that one special person, perhaps in that group that you connect with, and you're gonna get to know them slowly over the span of a couple of months, a year or two, and eventually, if you feel like this is a person that you can trust and you really feel the connection there, well, then you can put them in the category of of the people that you really, really trust, okay? So this is what I wanted to tell you. Remember that your sacred space is really important. And yes, connecting is really important. However, making a healthy relationship with yourself is even more important, okay? Making that healthy relationship with yourself, keeping your secrets, some secrets for yourself. They're nobody else's business. And not everybody has the privilege of knowing how you feel. Not everybody has the privilege of knowing what's in your sacred space. And not everybody also should be rescued. And you have to watch out for that, because when you rescue, you give your resources and you pour things away. You gotta keep some stuff for yourself. You really have to rescue yourself first. You gotta make sure that you are full before you can give. You gotta make sure that you're in a healthy space before you can give. You gotta make sure that you have enough for yourself before you jump on that rescuing ship, even though deep down inside, you might want to do that, because it has become almost a habit for some of us, to rescue, because it's like, if you don't go out of your way, you're worthless, right? If you don't go out of your way to do something for someone, you're not going to love you. That has to stop. That has to stop. And the importance of you treating yourself really good first is really paramount, okay? So I think that fighting that aloneness, that loneliness, starts with you learning to be comfortable with yourself first. You taking care of yourself first. You keeping your resources for yourself first. I've done this, I've done this, and it was a really, really, really long time. And even now, I gotta tell you, I choose my own company. I prefer my own company. Yeah, I can connect with people, and I do, because I'm not a hermit, but I prefer hermit mode. I like to be on my own company. I like to do solo sports. I enjoy, doing things for myself a lot more now than I do being around big groups. And that's good. And I like that. I love myself. I trust myself, right? So, I feel good with my own company now. So I just want you to know that, that aloneness, that extreme loneliness is very painful. And I encourage you really strongly to work on transforming that into being comfortable being alone. Because that way, when people go out of your life, your energy doesn't get disrupted. You remain grounded no matter who comes and goes, because you always have yourself to count on. You can always count on yourself, okay? So remember that, and remember to repeat, I love myself, I trust myself, and I hope this helped you. And I'll see you soon. Bye.